Thank you. Okay, moving on, comments from the chair and member comments. I would like to welcome Yash Nagal as the newest alternate for Palm Tran.
Yash is not present. He's not here today.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, he's out, but I'm the primary.
Okay, all right. We are excited to have him join the committee as an alternate. Thank you. At this time, I want to invite any TAC member comments on items not already on the agenda. For members participating remotely, please utilize the raise hand feature in the Zoom platform, and then remember to unmute your microphone once you are recognized. Do we have any raised hands?
There are no raised hands at this time, and I'm not seeing anybody in person either.
Okay, I don't see anyone in house either. Next is the TAC Liaison report. I'd like to invite Andrew to please provide an update.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'll be on the screen here and I'll go through them briefly. The first is we're excited to announce a new staff member. We have Brian Rooscher, who's joining us from Delray Beach. In his previous position, he's been taken over as the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator. He's here in attendance, he's gonna stand up. Comes with a lot of experience. We're excited to have him on staff. And he'll be overseeing also be the liaison for our Vision Zero Advisory Committee, and then he handles the Transportation Alternatives Program. Next is the town of Jupiter passed the Vision Zero resolution. We'd like to congratulate them for adopting that on June 7th. There's the Port of Palm Beach Master Plan update that's still ongoing. They have an online public comment period right now. We can go on and provide your feedback. It goes till July 7th, so that ends tomorrow for that portion. And it looks like they're trying to close out that master plan update by December. So if you still want to provide your feedback, you can go to their website at planportofpalmbeach.com. Next is the League of American Bicyclists Community Sparks Grants. Oh, you might want to go forward. And this is a smaller grants by the League of American Bicyclists. It's $1,500, and it's really meant to support creation of more bicycle-friendly communities. It's for nonprofits and other organizations. Applications are due by July 15th. Next page. AFDOT's going to be hosting District 4 is going to be hosting a virtual workshop for local road safety programs. So you can learn more about how your local agency can work with AFDOT and us, the TPA, develop safety projects and apply for those through the district. That's going to be held on July 26th at 1 p.m. It is virtual, and you can go to palmbeachtpa.org/AFDOT D4 workshop. Next is the Safe Streets and Roads for All grants are still open till September 15th. This is one of those new infrastructure funding out there for safety. It's for both planning and implementation grants, and you can find out more at transportation.gov/SS4A. And then there's also another new grant that just got released, and it's going to be due October 13th, and that's for Reconnecting Communities, another new one from the federal government. And this is for communities that were previously cut off from economic opportunities by transportation infrastructure. The deadline again is October 13th, and you can find out more information through the link. And lastly, our next TPA governing board meetings will be held on July 21st, both in person, and you can attend virtually. Thank you. Oh, I have one more thing for you all specifically. I believe it was Terrence Bailey asked last meeting about just sort of what's the legal standing for virtual public meetings, and are we able to have him entirely virtual when it comes to quorum? And we got back with we got both this question answered and a series of other questions answered related to virtual quorum and participation in a memo, and we can send that out. But specifically for this question, while local government meeting may be broadcast using Zoom or some other platform, in the absence of emergency order from the governor being in effect, a quorum of the local government body must be physically present at the meeting site. So the way we've been doing it here. And then in that memo, some other things that would be good for you all to read through is what outlines an extenuating circumstance for virtual participation allowance. So the Attorney General put out some examples of what constitutes that. And then our legal consultant also put in examples of what wouldn't constitute that. Is there any questions on those?
Thank you very much, Andrew.
And then we have one other thing for you, another request. We have a mobility options video that was created by our staff here at the TPA, and we're going to show that video for you now. And then I'll be done.
Palm Beach County is home to beautiful beaches, diverse culinary experiences, exciting entertainment, and more. Getting around to experience it all is easy with each of the county's mobility options, from buses to trains and everything in between. PalmTran is Palm Beach County's public transit system, with buses from Jupiter to Boca Raton and Palm Beach to the Glades. PalmTran offers 32 routes to take you across the county and on demand with the Go Glades service. Paratransit services are also available through PalmTran Connection. Tri-Rail is South Florida's commuter train connecting Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade counties. Tri-Rail offers 6 stops from Mangonia Park to Boca Raton within Palm Beach County. Trains run every day and connect all the way to Miami International Airport. For a higher speed service, check out Brightline. With stations from West Palm Beach to Fort Lauderdale and Miami, you can experience all of South Florida without the stress of traffic. Be sure to check out the first and last mile connections across the county too, including Brightline Plus and Brightbike, the West Palm Beach trolleys, and local circulators like Circuit in West Palm Beach and Freebie in Delray Beach. If you need door-to-door service, local taxi providers and on-demand services like Uber and Lyft can take you where you need to go. In addition, try walking and bicycling in our beautiful county as an active and healthy mode of transportation. Next time you're in Palm Beach County, try one of the many multimodal transportation options to get around. With so many choices, it's easy to go car-free. To learn more about all of the mobility options in Palm Beach County, head to palmbeachtpa.org/mobility.
So that was a strategic plan initiative from fiscal year 2022, this last year, to really highlight all of our transportation options here in the county. So,
Madam Chair, I would like to let you know, and for the record, that Will Hicks has joined us.
Thank you. Staff, are there any public comments on this item?
Not at this time, Madam Chair.
Do any committee members have any comments or questions about the liaison report? Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to action items. The first item is the motion to recommend adoption of the fiscal year FY 24-28 list of priority projects, the Lrtp. I'd like to invite Jason Price, TPA TIP coordinator, to present this item.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm going to present to you the list of priority projects for fiscal year 24 through 28 for the Palm Beach TPA. This list of priority projects is part of the development of the Transportation Improvement Program. And as a reminder to the group, this is an action item that will require a vote at the end of the presentation and discussion. The list of priority projects fits into our mission, that is to collaboratively plan, prioritize, and fund the transportation system. And the list of priority projects acts as the vehicle and the document to prioritize the projects that the TPA would like to see funded in the next round, in the next Transportation Improvement Program. The list of priority projects is part of the TIP development process, and TIP is the Transportation Improvement Program, the overall 5-year document that the list of priority projects is an integral part of. This list of priority projects, once it's completed, and it's made up of 3 grant programs, the state road modifications, local initiatives, and transportation alternatives. Once this is approved, it will be provided to FDOT to be incorporated into the draft tentative work program where it's cost feasible. And then we'll use that draft tentative work program in future months to develop the draft and final TIP as part of this development process. To assign some dates to this development process, before you today is the list of priority projects in July, and that list of priority projects, once it's received by FDOT, will create a draft tentative work program that we'll see in the late summer or fall of this year. Following that, we'll provide our analysis of their draft tentative work program. And then next year, we'll go through the months of developing a draft tip and a final draft after the draft tentative work program in the next fiscal year or the next year. So the list of priority projects is made up of three of the programs for the TPA, and that's state road modifications, local initiatives, and transportation alternatives. They all have different funding amounts, and those funds come from different sources, and the projects are derived from different sources as well, either the Lrtp or the annual competitive grant program. In the next few slides, we're going to review all three of those programs, starting with state road modifications. And I'd like to invite Andrew Euler up, and he'll review the state road modifications overview of the program, as well as the ask that the TPA is asking of FDOT as part of the list of priority projects.
Thank you, Jason. So for the state road modifications program, this is really the purpose of this one is to construct and enhance state roadways to advance TPA's vision. The money, as Jason has pointed out, this one's all state funding. So it's required to be used on state facilities. The products for these are really, we've in the past historically had some larger capacity projects, and we still have a few of those in our priority list. There's State Road 7, Atlantic Avenue still needs to be fully funded. But there's other products out there that we're sort of more drawing to with our vision with safety, complete streets, transit, technology when it comes to signals and resiliency. It's about $20 million a year is what we typically may see. Obviously, it fluctuates depending on the projects and other priorities that we have at the state level with the strategic intermodal system and operations and maintenance of our system that all use these state funds. But we roughly see around $20 million a year. And to point out, the new fifth year in a timeline, that's typically when you'll see the money available is in a new outer fifth year. And so in this case, you may see in the priority list, we have our programmed amounts from up to 27. And then you may see these new priorities come into fiscal year 2028. So I'm just going to go through the main priority requests. The backup has the full list, but in order, the first one is Atlantic Avenue widening from Lyons Road to Jog Road. The western portion of this project is already funded and it's going to construction next few years. What's still left to be programmed for Atlantic Avenue is the larger construction cost. And so our request is to, if possible, accelerate right away and then get the construction funding in the program for this next tip. The other one is the US 1 Enhanced Transit and Multimodal Corridor Facilities. So this stemmed out of our US 1 Multimodal Corridor Study that we did a few years ago. There was a lot of different projects and different sections throughout the county on US 1. A few requests here that still need to be funded is construction funding for a lane repurposing project in Boca Raton, construction funding for a complete streets reconstruction project in West Palm Beach, and then design funding for lane repurposing project in Lake Worth Beach, pending the FDOT approval process for lane repurposing. Next is the Okeechobee Boulevard Enhanced Transit Multimodal Corridor Studies facility. So in a similar fashion, this one's right now in the process of finalizing our 2-year corridor study that we've been doing that you all participated in, and we had some open houses recently. That's being wrapped up, and you all will see that final results of that along with the main recommendation in the coming months. I think we're shooting for September, but it'll be later this year when we come to you all for final approval and to the board. But what we're looking to do that is that next phase of that corridor study is really a feasibility study from FDOT based on what the results of the planning study provide. So that's what we're looking to have funded next, is that feasibility study. And then also on Okeechobee Boulevard, there's already some design funds in there for enhanced transit shelters. We're looking to finalize sort of what that's going to look like and then move forward with construction funding if possible for enhanced transit shelters. Next is the Lake Worth Road Corridor. This is also enhanced transit multimodal corridor facilities. This is going to be part of a greater study with other corridors for enhanced transit instead of it being like a single study like the Okeechobee and US 1 have been. But in this one, we still have in the past had transnational prioritization, just like we've had on Okeechobee Boulevard and on US 1. This is another way we'd like to get funding for transnational prioritization. And then the last one I'm showing you today is Federal Highway at Spanish River Boulevard, which is an intersection project down in Boca. There's a series of other intersection projects that you'll see for signal improvements with mast arms and technology, both in the county and from Boca Raton. And those are all on the list. The one I'm just highlighting for you is higher up the list a little bit, and it's a smaller funding amount. And that's one for requesting construction funding. And that's it. I'll turn it back over to Jason.
Thank you, Andrew. So now I'm going to go over the two annual competitive grant programs and the projects within those that were submitted this year for both of those programs. Just a quick overview for local initiatives. It provides about $22 million in federal funds annually, and the projects are eligible to receive about $5 million per project with a minimum of $250 for each project. Once funds were awarded, it's expected that the design would be completed in year 3 and the construction funds would be received in year 5. These projects were only eligible for local initiatives on the federal aid eligible roadway network, and the types of projects that we're seeking to fund and complete are for complete streets, transit capital, and non-motorized infrastructure like bike and pedestrian infrastructure, as well as freight efficiencies. The two requests that the TPA have for local initiatives to FDOT is first to update the programming funding to support the TPA's planning and administration consistent with the TPA's UPWP, and that's our operating planning budget document that is incorporated into our local initiatives. The next is the request to fund the 7 projects that were submitted as part of this previous cycle for local initiatives, the annual grant cycle. So now I'll go over the 7 projects that were submitted that we're seeking to incorporate into the TIP document. The first is a 10-foot shared use pathway with some missing sidewalks on Southwest 18th Street for Boca Raton. And that's followed by the purchase of new rolling stock for Tri-Rail, followed by a 5-foot designated bike lane and an 8-foot sidewalk on Gardens Parkway in Palm Beach Gardens to connect Gardens Parkway to their mall, as well as Palm Trans seeking to transition their bus fleet to an electric bus fleet, and they're looking for funding for 4 new electric buses. The last 3 of the 7 is a 10-foot shared use pathway and new sidewalks on Barwick Road in Delray Beach, as well as Palm Trans seeking to improve bus stops throughout Palm Beach County. And lastly, Indian Trail Improvement District. They're looking to install Seminole speed tables throughout Indian Trail Improvement District along Temple Boulevard, Hall Boulevard, and 140th Avenue. Next, I'll review the Transportation Alternatives Program. This is the smaller of the 3 grant programs, and this is also an annual competitive grant program that provides about $3.3 million in federal funds, with a maximum that projects can receive about $1 million in funds with a minimum of $250. And the design, the implementation timeline is to complete the design year in year 1 and receive construction funding in year 3. And just as a note, for both of these annual competitive grant programs, they only fund construction funding for these. And transportation alternative funding can be used throughout the county on local roadways where there's limitations on local initiatives where it's only on the federal aid eligible roadway network. This particular program offers funding for local roadways in addition to the federal aid eligible roadway network. And the types of projects, although it's a smaller amount of money, it does a great job of completing bike and pedestrian infrastructure throughout the county. And the types of projects are complete streets projects, bike and pedestrian infrastructure, as I mentioned, traffic calming, historic preservation, and safe routes to school. Now there's four projects that were submitted as part of this previous grant application cycle, and we're requesting funding for all 4. And here's a list of those 4 projects that were submitted that we'd like to see funding for. First is Indian Trail Improvement District. They're looking to install a 10-foot shared use pathway and expand their existing sidewalk to an 8-foot sidewalk along Hamlin Boulevard, Grapeview Boulevard, and Citrus Grove Boulevard. And that's followed by Palm Beach Gardens, which would like to install buffered bike lanes and an 8-foot pathway on the south side of the roadway of Fairchild Avenue, not too far from the LI project and Gardens Parkway. And then Royal Palm Beach is looking to install pedestrian and bicycle network wayfinding throughout Royal Palm Beach to make it easier to navigate throughout Royal Palm Beach as either a pedestrian or on a bicycle. And in conclusion, there is West Palm Beach. They're seeking to improve 49th Street with ADA curb ramps, sidewalks, traffic calming, and sharrows for bicycles. And so for additional information for the list of priority projects, you can go to our website at palmbeach.org/priorities, and that'll give you access to the document that lists all of the priorities for the TPA throughout all of the years and all of the projects. If you want to find out more about the 3 grant programs, state road modifications, local initiatives, or transportation alternatives, go to our /funding at our website, and you can get a program overview for each one of those programs. And with that, I'd like to conclude, and I'm looking for a motion to recommend adoption of the list of priority projects, and I can take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Jason. Staff, I see we have public comments.
Yes, Madam Chair. And I do want to point out that Aramis Cabrera, did join us on behalf of Kim Glass Castro. We'll start with the public comment, and Kershita, let me allow you to speak. Give me one moment and you'll see that. And please do state your full name and the agency that you're with.
Kershit Mahayuddin with Palm Beach County Planning Division. Looking at page 14 and 16 regarding the Okeechobee Boulevard Enhanced Transit Service, and I apologize, I may have missed Andrew's explanation, but I think it should be changed to say where it says FDOT based on TPA planning study recommendations. It should say based on alternatives identified in TPA planning study. That way we will have the detailed analysis for all the alternatives, because the planning study didn't go into alternatives. I keep asking about ridership data and technical aspects of the analysis that were not done yet. So if you go with a recommendation now and choose a particular or 1 or 2 alternatives, and you don't want to find at the end that, oh, those are not technically feasible or whatever. So technical analysis should be probably done on all the alternatives. So my recommendation is to change the wording in there, saying based on, and add alternatives identified in TPA planning study, full stop, in both pages 14 and I believe this is 16, which has the item table 1 for Okeechobee 18.1C item. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
There are no further public comments, but we do have a hand raised from one of our online participants.
Okay. I'll start in-house. Alex?
Question on the item for the Okeechobee Boulevard feasibility study. I see that you have allocated $1 million for that study in the table. I did not see that $1 million allocated to a specific year or years. So I was just curious, based on what you indicated, typically you put it at the end of the table. I realize you may want to do it before then, but I was just curious about the fact that there was no specific time frame for the allocation of that funding in the table. So I was curious about that. I see everything else has a year or years allocated to it. And then the other one was more like a general comment on, I see, for example, the local initiatives, I believe the maximum score can be 100 for the ranking of the projects. So the highest ranked project had 25. We had projects that rank as low as 11. Transportation alternatives, somewhat similar. Just a general kind of a thought, and I realize this may be a discussion for another meeting. If we have projects that are scoring 1/4 of all the available points, and that is the highest ranked projects, I'm not sure if there's an issue with the type of projects that we're receiving, with the scoring system that we use. It just seems to me a little bit out of whack that we have projects that are scoring so low, that all the projects are scoring so low in this two categories. Just a general comment. I mean, I think that may be a conversation for the future as to whether the scoring criteria that we use is appropriate, whether there's something going on with the type of projects that we're receiving. But I was just kind of curious about that.
Okay.
Sure.
You want to take the first one? I'll
Yep.
take the second.
Yep. Thank you. It's a good question. The first one you had there, obviously, we don't want to wait 5 years for a feasibility study from FDOT. So we're working with FDOT on where that would come, be programmed. And the request would be more so next year, right? Instead of that far out. So I think for our final version, we can try to that we bring to the board. We can maybe get more clarification and put a time frame on there about what the request shows. And I think it'd be appropriate for us to put the request at next year. To be able to.
And I have no problem with that. It was just curious that there was no year for that. So I thought that should be probably included somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And for the scoring for LI, it's more of appearances. The local initiatives program covers a lot of ground in terms of the variety of projects that are eligible, where TA kind of funnels it down to really only multimodal projects for bike and pedestrian facilities, where local initiatives, you could go in multiple different directions. You can get transit capital, freight efficiencies, bike and pedestrian projects. You can cover so many different types of projects, and the variety of projects lends itself to a scoring system to where you don't really rank high because you don't really meet all of the criteria. Only a fraction of the criteria based on the type of project. It could be a freight project, a non-motorized project, or just improving an intersection. And all of those, you're awarded points, but not a lot of points because there's points for all different categories of projects. So they almost always score low. So it gives the appearance that nothing really ranks high because it's a 100-point scale, but you'll never get 100 points because you can never meet all of the criteria for all of the scoring metrics. And so that's how that is. And thank you for the comment, because it's something that I should probably, kind of disclose and explain when I introduce the programs, to where don't expect to score high because you can't meet a lot of the metrics, because the scoring system is designed to give at least some types of points for the different variety of projects that are available to be eligible, that could be eligible for the program. So that's why the scoring is kind of low, but we've eliminated, like last year, there was a 25-point cutoff. If you didn't get at least 25 points, you were ineligible. But we found that really good projects, they might not score well, but they're still good projects. So we eliminated that to make all of the projects eligible. And it opens up the door for more conversations to look at these projects, discuss them, discuss the merits of the project, and provide funding for projects regardless of the score. It's basically the merit of the project and what it seeks to accomplish.
Thank you, Jason. Natalie?
This is on. Wait. Jason, can you help clarify? I just want to make sure that I'm not missing something, because I'm looking at the list of projects and I just want to be sure this is not an all-inclusive list from DOT, because I know we have ramp improvements. The City of Palm Beach Gardens has ramp improvements at North Lake Boulevard, and eminent domain is going on at the central ramp. So this is the OPP, but it
Yeah,
is just
this is
the
a request.
priorities within the TIP. And so
Re-
really the purpose of this is to modify the priority and then add the LI and the TA as part of this amendment round, right?
And SRM, yeah.
Okay.
So it's basically the TPA priority projects within the purview of LITA and SRM. There's a whole gamut of projects that FDOT implements as part of the Transportation Improvement
Right.
Program that isn't a part of this, because this is the request by the TPA to include the new projects from the annual competitive grant programs, as well as the modifications we'd like to see on state roadways, part of the SRM
Right, in the
program. So
roadways.
you could, yeah, so that's really, it is a small subset of projects.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing that because those are important projects too. I didn't want to make sure that they fell off the list. I have no other comments other than it's nice to see these mobility projects on many jurisdictions moving forward. Thank you.
Javier.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam
Morning.
Chair. Just following up on Alex's comment on the both the ranking for the TA and the LI projects. It seems that maybe as a suggestion for the next round of developing this criteria for the upcoming year, maybe we have a deeper discussion in the committee about what is it that looks like a realistic scoring. There is a lot of work going on behind the curtains at the city level on this, and it's a both of them are very competitive programs. So I think we want to be right on target and knowing specifically from the beginning what we're looking at, so that way we can schedule our time and effort to make it a successful application. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, from our people online, Mo.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you. I have a question for, I think it will be Andrew, and then follow up with my comments after that. So my question is, what does the feasibility study that we are proposing for Okeechobee/SR7 corridors would entail?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mo.
Sure.
I might have to defer a little bit to John. I'm not sure if you have more of an answer for that. I'm sorry, but
So this is John Crane, Mo. In terms of the feasibility study, right now, we're going to take whatever results would come out of the final recommendations from the TPA planning study and advance that into, is it physically feasible? What are the types of feasible impacts, that are going to result from that concept? Because what's coming out of the planning study is essentially a concept. So this will take a much more scrutinous look at all the potential impacts and whether or not it's even feasible. So before we get into a much more detailed PD&E study, it's kind of a more protracted process to get to the PD&E. I think first you do the planning study, then you're going to do a feasibility assessment, and then you would go into project development or concept development, where you actually start to look at, I believe, some of the harder details of the project, and then you would apply to get into a PD&E study. So through the transit process, it's much more protracted, if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it's kind of constructability, whether there are any flaws, fatal flaws for the concept or the project, whether it can really be built with reasonable cost or tolerable cost, etc. That's what I thought would be the answer. So the reason I asked that question, because I had in my mind, some people think that the feasibility study and the subsequent studies and evaluations would include evaluating the traffic flow and accessibility impact of the alternative and evaluate alternatives, which is not true. The feasibility study and moving on would only focus on whatever spewed out of the evaluation study that is getting to a conclusion now. And we, the county, have grave, concerns about the way that study and evaluation was done. We believe it's flawed, or at least is inadequate in the way it was conducted, and it was in the way it was setting up the alternatives, and in the way that it ended up selecting the alternatives. And what we saw lately from the workshop that was presented to the public not long ago, it seems like the alternative that is being recommended is a light rail along this corridor. We discussed that with our staff, discussed that with the engineers who were conducting that study, and they were asked about what their ambition or thoughts of what would be the ridership of that alternative or that light rail. And the answer was 8,000 vehicles daily. If you take that and, without doing much study and spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars on evaluating and scrutinizing it, on the face value, look at it, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. You will be taking away one lane of travel in each direction and move only 8,000 persons per day. Those 2 lanes that you'll be eliminating are currently moving more than 3 times that many. Okay, so, and more importantly, that this study has failed to mention and or include in even a remote way the impact of any alternative in terms of travel time reliability, etc. And more importantly, it failed to include tools that are necessary in evaluating alternatives when it comes to transportation and traffic flow and accessibility, which include simulation and modeling for a corridor like this one, where already that we are looking at alternatives and multimodalism because we believe that we are being killed by congestion. So the saying is always, you cannot build your way out of congestion. So our problem is congestion, right? That's why we are looking at multimodalism, and we want to promote other modes of transportation because we believe that will solve our congestion problem. What congestion means? It's travel time, right? We are not including even that, metric or criteria in the evaluation of the alternative. So we have issues with the way the whole, study was conducted. And we discussed that, our staff discussed that with the project managers, with the consultant who conducted this evaluation study, and they did not disagree. Their answer was, well, we are sorry, but this is the scope of work that was given to us. We wish we were given more money and resources and ability to do it right. So our concern is that we are pushing through a project that was an alternative that was selected based on flawed and or inadequate evaluation and study that lacks the engineering fundamental industry accepted standards in evaluating alternatives. And it's also lacked the basic alternative in any evaluation. The basic alternative is always do nothing. In this case, do nothing means increase the frequency of bus transit, but keep them in the general traffic lanes and see how they compete with the others. And look also at the impacts in terms of travel time, etc., for all users, not only the few that will be hopping into that transit system. So based on that, we cannot, support advancing, an alternative that comes out from a flawed or inadequate evaluation study. At least I would recommend, and I like what Khurshid has suggested, I would tweak it a little more, is that the description of that project should be the alternative that or mode of transport that is adopted or approved by the TPA board, not what is recommended by the consultant based on a flawed or inadequate evaluation. I mean, it's a disaster to put a light rail along this corridor, knowing that it's a very small fraction of trips that originate and end along this corridor. If your trip does not originate and end along that corridor, there is no way that you would be able to consider using that mode of transit. and abandon your car. So the whole thing is, and there's easy, there are easy tools that can be used nowadays to evaluate these things. You can use the big data to show the percentage of trips that originate and terminate along that corridor. Even that simple thing was not done. I will be opposed to, and it's unfortunate because this LPP includes a lot of great projects, but because of this project being included, I think it's premature. We need first to do our homework, do the proper evaluation and vetting of the alternative that we want to move through and push through, but this is not being done. At least, and we are hoping that the board of the TPA would be able to listen to our concerns and vote down and or require the TPA staff to redo the evaluation based on more proper and adequate evaluation methodology. Thank you.
Any other comments from our online?
There are no other online comments.
Okay. Yes, Andrew.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify just a little bit more about the study moving forward. We have it on our agenda scheduled for an action item to go to you all and then to the governing board. Looks like we're shooting for October, right? So what Mo's talking about with the final recommendation that gets approved, that will be in front of you all in October and then approved by the governing board. And when it comes to 18-1C, that's what Khurshid and Mo just mentioned about the description of it, where it says roadway feasibility study based on TPA planning study recommendation. Sort of what we meant by that is what Mo's stating in a way about, it is based on the approval that you all and then the board finally provides. So I just want to make that clarification. I can change that wording if you'd like to be more precise in that, saying it's the board approved recommendation, if that makes it more palatable or but overall that's just what I want to provide some clarity.
Okay, we'll see what kind of motion we get. I do not see any other comments in house. I need a motion to recommend adoption of the fiscal year 24-28 list of priority projects that I can open. Then I can open the floor for any further discussions.
Motion to approve. Second.
Where was my second? Thank you. Okay, we have comments from Alex.
Because the list includes the State Road 7 projects that the city of West Palm Beach opposes and is currently in litigation. So I cannot support the motion as proposed.
Thank you. And then we have Mo online.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if I can make a friendly amendment to the motion. I would like, to strike out this particular project because it's premature to program it now, the feasibility for Okeechobee/SR7. Strike this out from the proposed LPP and move to approve it without this project. I don't know if that's possible to make such a motion or a recommendation.
So I believe he's asking the person who made the original motion if they would amend their motion to strike out. He didn't sound like he was making an alternative motion. Is that correct, Mo?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, Kim?
So I hear most concerns, and perhaps an alternate amendment could be to amend the language in 18-1C under the description to indicate roadway feasibility study based on TPA, planning study recommendation, and board direction. I think that captures the concerns that Mo's raised. It's implicit that these activities are reliant upon board direction, but this is a more extensive project that has larger roadway and land use implications. So I'll suggest that for consideration of the motion makers.
Mr. Odell, you have two requests for alteration. One is Mo to strike out that item completely, and the other is from Kim to change the language to refer to the board having the final authority or recommendation, correct?
Correct. I can't accept the strikeout, but I will accept Kim's alternative.
Okay, and see if your second will accept.
I second it.
Okay. All right, I don't see any other cards up. Hearing no further discussion, I have a motion by Mr. Odell and a second by Mr. Hoffman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
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 I have nays from Jorge Perez, Alex Hansen, Javier, and Mo. Thank you.
And here too, Jupiter.
Sorry, just for the record, I want to clarify that my no again is because of the State Road 7. So that I want it on the record.
Thank you, Alex.
Also, Madam Chair, I want to clarify the same. City of West Palm Beach representatives. Thank you.
Next is a motion to recommend approval of the
Chair?
fiscal year 23 strategic plan.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I think that we might have heard a dissenting vote from an online participant. CJ, was that you?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I also second most motions to eliminate that from consideration.
Mo didn't make a motion, but thank you.
And Madam Chair, would it be possible for our liaison to just have everybody provide the reason for why they were dissenting?
Okay, let's just clarify the nays just to make sure we have for the record correctly. Alex Hansen, Jorge Perez, CJ Land, and then we had Javier Oconee. Are we missing anybody? And Mo Targ. Okay, we're good, right? Okay. Yes, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the motion to recommend approval of the fiscal year 23 strategic plan. I'd like to invite Andrew to present this item.
Hello again. We see me a lot today. This is the draft fiscal year 2023 strategic plan. And this really covers actions to advance the TPA's mission and vision. So you all saw the Unified Planning Work Program last month. That's going to set the course for the next 2 years, fiscal year 2023 and 2024. Also on top of that, we have a strategic plan that we put out every year that it sort of aligns with the UPWP, and it furthers other actions that we have that we feel can accomplish our mission and vision. And what you'll see in this one, this time around with these draft changes here, you'll see some strike throughs and sort of like consolidation of some actions and getting rid of a few others. We're trying to keep it to around 3 to 5 actions total per goal, because it does take some time and it's sometimes above and beyond some of the things we do in our UPWP. So I wanted to mention that there is a fiscal year 2022 annual report highlights brochure. I guess you all have them on your table here in person. And then for those online, you can find this at palmbeachtpa.org/annual report. Our staff put this together, just encompasses what we did in fiscal year 2022. And it talks a little bit about some of the actions we had in our strategic plan for 2022. So going through the draft fiscal year 23 strategic plan, you'll see strike throughs and underlines for all of them. And they go through all the different goals we have at the agency. Before this, it was reviewed by our executive committee. So they provided their feedback on this. They met on June 6th to recommend updates. And then it's seen by you all. And then the draft will be going to the governing board for final adoption this month. Our executive committee is made up of 5 of our board members. And then for the first goal we have is engage the public. And you'll see a lot of strike throughs and underlines on this one, but really it was us sort of clarifying and making it a little more streamlined when it comes to the sort of outcomes we're trying to seek. And so you'll see the outcomes here when it comes to direct feedback with comments as one of them. The next one that is about followers and then impressions we get. So how often do you see our content for a person? And then in the next one is participants at events. And then the next one is media related stories. And the last one is presentations to the public and partner agencies. So they all sort of are broken out with different types of outcomes that sort of all round out to like engage the public. One of the ones I wanted to mention, I guess, up front is the first one, which is 500 comments when it comes to collecting public comments via online map, surveys, and other platforms that we have for transportation planning efforts. Our goal last year was to do it all through our interactive comment map. We have other avenues for people to submit. And so that's why we made that more well-rounded for all of the avenues we have for public comments. Next is the goal is plan the system. This one has a few strike throughs, so it's going to have less actions overall. Some of these were just basic updates that are one-time things. So our complete streets design guidelines, we're finalizing those, and those will be coming out pretty soon for this past fiscal year. We had a report on the COVID-19 pandemic on current and future travel patterns. That was complete. One I wanted to mention specifically was B, which was commenced multimodal studies on transit plan corridors. We're shooting for 2 studies a year. Really what we're going to do next is sort of integrating that more into the first one, which is refined countywide mobility vision and funding plan. So our next study that we're doing is really going to encompass all the remaining corridors, more from like a land use perspective and a few other things higher level than the detail you'd see in like a US 1 or Oaktree Boulevard corridor study. Next is prioritized funding. The first one is was done. It was create the state road modification scoring system. You all had a hand in that in creating that program or the scoring for that. So now we're moving more towards implementation of products. So making sure we're getting safety products on our priority list that you just saw and getting those funded. So this is to identify and prioritize safety products from our high crash corridors and then our tier 1 pedestrian bicycle network. And we're looking to have 5 safety products prioritized in the year. And then lastly, on C now, participate in the creation of MPOAC legislative priorities and policy positions. We had originally more of like a leading role for the staff to advocate for TPA adopted legislative and policy positions and to push for amended laws and policies. We recently had direction from our board to focus more on just integrating our vision and values into the MPOAC, which is our statewide MPO group who pushes legislative and policy positions. So it's less of a burden on staff and we can work directly with them who will be pushing those at the state and federal level. Next is goal 4, implemented projects. This one change here. We originally had one to support accelerated product delivery by partner agencies. That's still a really tricky one for us, and it's been tough for us to get that implemented. We talk about the system in place and everything coming in the new 5th year. It can be really difficult to sort of accelerate products in the program. We changed this one to say assist municipalities with product identification and grant application submittals. So sometimes with the list you just saw with LI and TA, we aren't getting a plethora of products in there overall. And a lot of times we can fund most of the products or all of them. And so we're looking to try to help out municipalities some more product identification and grant application submittals, maybe ones who need more resources to do this. And we're looking to do 4 product submittals. So hopefully by next year, we'll see additional submittals on our grant programs. Collaborate partners, number 5 goal. Pretty basic updates here. Number C, or letter C, is we did have a create mobilities option video. That's the one you saw today, which provided an overview of our mobility options in the county. Now we're looking to create shorter videos for how to ride and create 5 videos on those, and looking to try to do that in-house as well. And then lastly is a new one for E, conduct mobile tours with partner agencies to experience local transportation facilities and services. I believe this stems from executive committee discussion. They enjoyed, and I think you all have been on it before, we used to have more tours when it goes down to the community and see different parts of geography in the county, and then also transportation services. So we've done a tour of the port of Palm Beach before, so more of those sort of tours to see the side of sort of transportation facilities we have in the county. And the last one, administer the agency. Going to look to update our board and committee onboarding resources. We have a handbook, but looking to update that, update a video on that, and then provide a workshop annually that people can attend. And so that'd be a great way to learn more about the MPO process and then overall our county, and then provide that in the handbook and video if you weren't able to attend the workshop. And the last two on this one for administrative agency are small updates, just pursuing one new designation for a distinguished workplace, and then changing the summary for our quarterly financial summaries to fiscal year 2022. That's all I have for you.
Thank you, Andrew. Staff, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. I do not see any raised cards in house. Make sure I'm not missing anyone. I need a motion to recommend approval of the FY23 strategic plan. Then I can open the floor for any discussion.
Second.
Terrence. Any discussion? Don't see any raised cards.
So they're on the motion. It's well organized and it's great.
Would you be able to turn on your microphone, please?
And
thank you.
Sorry about that. I think the plan is well organized, and it's very encouraging to see the TPA pressing the envelope. So it's the TPA, I think, has become a very strong policy leader, and especially in the area of multimodalism, and the action plan really reflects that. So I think it's a good step, a good continued step forward for the agency.
Thank you, Kim. Hearing no further discussion, I have a motion by Kim and a second by Terrence. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, say nay. Thank you. The next is a motion to recommend ratification of fiscal year 2021 to 2022 Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP, revision number 4 amendment. I'd like to invite Matthew, TPA Chief Financial Officer, to present this item.
Good morning. I'll be discussing, again, this is for fiscal year 21 and 2022. So it just ended on June 30th. We just closed this amendment, and we're seeking a recommendation to ratify the amendment that was conducted. I'll explain why that activity occurred and give a little background. Again, our Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, that's our operating plan and budget. So staff time, consultant effort, direct expenses to provide the plans, conduct these meetings, and enact the decisions of the governing board. It also constitutes our federal grant application for funding. And it says what we'll do, who's going to do that effort, when it will happen, and how much it will cost ultimately. And again, this is for the budget that just closed June 30th that we took action to ensure our funding was used in the best possible way. And our agency, the TPA, is funded. Basically, we have 4 grants during this last funding cycle. One of them, Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, PL funds, Federal Highway Administration, SU funds, Federal Transit Administration, and 2 different funding cycles for that. The one that really has driven this amendment that needed to occur is that second column, FHWA, SU funds. Those are valuable funds that help us provide great plans and great services, but they also expire at the end of a UPWP. So if we don't use them, then they don't carry forward. All the others do carry forward. And in order to make sure we expend those first, we have to do some rework in the budget to ensure that the costs hit that appropriate category. So largely this amendment was to accomplish that effort and then to reflect the staff, consultant, and direct expenses that occurred. And as the second bullet notes, we had some expenses that were still available in fiscal 21 that we thought we would spend that actually occurred in 22. So this is just an administrative effort to reflect them in the proper year within that budget cycle. And what's unique about our budget cycles is it's a 2-year cycle versus a 1-year specific. So it makes some nuance in making sure we're compliant with what we've said and presented to you, and that we enacted ultimately the choice of the board and these committees. Ultimately, that was the outcome of this effort. And due to it being late in the year, in the fiscal year, we had to enact the amendment before the funding period closed on June 30th. So we're seeking recommendation to ratify that effort for the reasons that were explained.
Okay. Staff, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay, staff, are there any public comments? Oh, I already asked that. Did any committee members have any comments online?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, I need a motion to recommend ratification of the fiscal year 2021-2022 UPWP revision number 4 amendment. Then I can open the floor for discussion if desired.
Motion to approve.
Second.
That was you. Okay. Okay. I don't see any raised cards in-house. Any raised hands online?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, I have a motion by Natalie and a second by Levi. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Moving on. The next are informational items. The first is the draft 2050 LRTP scope of services. I'd like to invite Andrew to present this item.
All right, this one's an exciting one. We sent this out, this draft 2050 long range transportation plan scope of services. We sent this out by email a few weeks ago, and we're seeking your feedback on it. And so, we can gather comments today. I'll give you a little bit of overview and things I wanted to focus on from that document and what we're doing in our scope. But you can really submit comments to us still with the next week or so. We'd love to be able to incorporate those, even if you don't, read through it. It's a long scope, and you still want to provide your ideas by email. Just email me, and I'll be able to look through that and see how we can incorporate it. So I'm going to go quickly about what this is, and then I'll get into the scope itself. So we have 3 main core documents. You've actually seen them all mentioned today already. The Unified Planning Work Program, which is our 2-year planning activities for the agency. We have our Transportation Improvement Program, which funds the 5 years of transportation products. And then we have our long range transportation plan. It's required by law to be at least 20 years. Here in Florida, most of the MPOs add an additional 5 years. So it's a 25-year plan. That's what our partners do. And that's what we've been doing as well when we do this updated cycle. And it happens every 5 years. So our partners in Broward and Miami-Dade are also kicking theirs off and going through their scopes and getting those finalized and moving forward as well. So what is an LRTP? It really maps out the future state and federal transportation investments we have for the urbanized area. For here, it's our county. It serves as the foundation for the development of the TIP projects. So we take the cost feasible projects from our LRTP, and those are the ones, the programs and the projects move into the transportation improvement program. So all those major strategic intermodal system investments by FDOT, all those roadway widenings, capacity projects and interchanges, all the products that you've seen on our list of priority projects or those programs, those are all reflected first in the long range transportation plan. And we really are doing it based on our priorities that we set forth in that. So we have a vision of a safe, efficient, connected multimodal transportation system. So with that vision, we then set performance, like how do we achieve those, right? And then that's what we're trying to prioritize and push forward in our LRTP, and then ultimately our TIP. A recap of what we did in 2045 was adopted not too long ago, 2019 in December. It was from 2020 to 2045 planning horizon. Some of the main outcomes from that, we defined a prioritized pedestrian bicycle corridor network, prioritized transit corridors for enhanced services, and then set obviously our measures and targets for our goals and outline some of our funding programs. When it comes to these LRTPs, we do have requirements, both federal and state requirements, and what you're supposed to integrate into your LRTP. These were mentioned last time in our presentation. But Code of Federal Regulations, when it comes to this minimum 20-year planning horizon, has to be multimodal in nature, operation and management strategies in there, has to include your congestion management process. So And also should also consider equity and environmental mitigation strategies, and then should have a financial plan. So the core document in the end is really a financial plan. And then the Federal Highway Administration sets forth planning emphasis areas that they release, and the ones right now that will be integrated into the Lrtp process are the ones shown on the screen. So tackling the climate crisis when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. Next is equity and justice 40. So ensuring that we're investing in traditionally underserved communities. And the Justice 40 is really from the Biden administration about ensuring that the federal funds that are going towards communities, that at least 40% are happening in traditionally disadvantaged communities. We should also incorporate complete streets, ensure public involvement, and then coordination with other major federal departments. Okay, so getting into our 2050 Lrtp timeline, scope of services is out there right now. We're looking to bring that to the board sometime in September, and then we're going to go to advertisement for a consultant, and then selection in that in December timeframe, and then hopefully have them start early January 1st. Long-term milestones when it comes out, obviously we'll be changing a few of these as we go on, but what you all see, we'll see moving forward in the rest of the committees and the public, goals, objectives, measures sometime in summer 2023, a cost feasible plan later on in 2024, and then final document approval in 2024 in December. So it's really a 2-year process to get a new Lrtp created and updated. So you're the only ones who really had a dive into the scope of services. And really the reason was you all are going to be the steering committee for us. And we chose just to have only you all for technical advisory committee as the steering committee, because it's a little bit easier for staff and for consultants that we hire later on to work directly with you all and to have that continuous loop instead of trying to have a joint committee of multiple committee members from CAC and the Vision Zero Advisory Committee. So we're looking to go to you all as a steering committee. And what that really entails is just more frequent updates from us when it comes to the progress of the Lrtp. So this will be during your regularly scheduled meetings for the most part. We can get to in the future if we need to have other ones, but it's really going to occur during regularly scheduled meetings, and you'll see more presentations on technical items. The other committees will still get updates, and they'll provide their feedback during key moments in the process for milestones that they should have direct input in and adoption of. So performance measures, our final product needs list, and the cost feasible plan, and then ultimately the adoption of the document. That's all going to go to all committees, but you all will see even more than that throughout the 2-year time frame. So getting into the scope of services, there's lots of sections. It's 12 chapters. I'm only going to talk about 4 of them. It's a long document. So I just wanted to focus on these 4 because I felt those are the ones that represent the most changes and might bring the greatest discussion. The first is engage the public. And the first thing we're looking to do is establish a communication plan that sets forth our branding and our messaging and outreach. We do already have a required document, our public participation plan, that says how we reach out to the public. This will be more geared towards what directly are we going to do to tackle it for the 2050 Lrtp. We'll also have in the budget for the scope for the consultant, 30 community meetings, which would be for multiple members throughout the community. If it's for HOAs, if it's certain organizations, development boards, economic development council, local governments. We have 30 community meetings in there right now for a scope. And then we have 20 staff meetings with infrastructure owners. Those would be ones such as Palm Beach County Engineering, AFDOT, Tri-Rail. So having those throughout the process budgeted so we could have more one-on-ones with their needs and how to reflect what they need in the document. We're looking to have 5 community workshops in the county, throughout the county, dispersed in multiple geographic areas. And then we'd have 3 additional workshops right now at the TPA office in this room right here. So hopefully that's a good widespread amount of meetings to sort of get some feedback. And then on top of that, we're looking, and those are mostly traditional ways of reaching out, we're looking to have more interactive public participation tools when it comes to online for the entire document, even from beginning creation about what an Lrtp is, all the way through the mapping of projects. So you can go on and and provide your feedback on those projects specifically, all being more interactive on our website. And then we have in there 2 digital surveys throughout the process. We haven't established what those would be or when, but seeking feedback on those. And then for the consultant to also provide branding and outreach materials that our staff can run with and use when we're going to all these outside meetings, and also to use in our presentations. So the multimodal needs, which is a big one. It's always been our goal at the TPA to have a comprehensive list of projects for the next 25 years. We're always trying to look for a comprehensive list of projects in our 5-year plan, which it can be difficult as well. But we really want to know and showcase to the public exactly how much we're spending towards transportation in the county, all the way down to the local level. So in that, what we're really seeking is local submittals of projects from existing plans. And then we'll take those and we'll work with our consultants on creating consistent cost estimates. So it's all reflected the same inflation values and the same way of how to determine what those costs are going to be. But we're really looking for all projects, both locally funded and federal and state funded. Also included in the comprehensive list of projects is going to be an update and refinement of our pedestrian bicycle priority networks to really create projects for those specifically to see which are feasible. Right now, it's just a higher level network of we know we need to have facilities here, but it doesn't outline what those facilities are. So this would be getting more into the details of specifically what's feasible for that corridor, what's best when it comes to designated bike lane, separated facility, whichever. Should also include transit and local circulators, roadway capacity projects, ITS, freight, and then some other ones in there are going to be electric and alternative fuel infrastructure, a section on that and what sort of needs arise from that. Ongoing operations and maintenance, which is required to show in the document. And then a section on emerging technologies when it comes to comprehensive lifts. Some of those ones near the bottom, such as electric and alternative fuel infrastructure, and maybe definitely the emerging technologies, might not in the end come up with specific projects. If it does, that'd be great. But it might talk more high level about how to implement that when it comes to the other projects in the system. But we'll see where that sort of goes in the future. Okay, scenario planning and modeling. So this is a sort of a detailed section in the document. And I'm just going to talk through the 3 scenarios that I've outlined in this document for the consultant to do for our Lrtp. There's also a variety of scenarios that are ran at the regional level with our partners at Broward and Miami-Dade. So I'll talk about those next. And we can talk about, sort of how those integrate together. But the scenario planning that is set forth in this scope includes 3. The first is a 2050 scenario for complementary land use and development patterns. So what this would do is reallocate additional development from sort of like our baseline trend scenario into key areas based on potential land use policy changes. So looking at our corridors, for example, enhanced transit corridors throughout the county, like what we've considered 561 defined as. Looking at those corridors and determining where there are opportunities to change land use policy to make it more complementary for multimodal development and travel. So that'd be the first scenario. The second one would be very similar, but it's really 2050 existing opportunities. So not changing any of those underlying land use policies, but really seeing what do we have to work with right now and what sort of complementary land use can you get out there for multimodal facilities already. And then lastly, a 2035 existing opportunities land use and development scenario. So the same scenario, existing opportunities, but what's going to happen in just 10 years time from now when this document's implemented, right? So what can we do in 10 years and what would that actually look like in 10 years? So I think that's a good scenario that kind of showcases what can be done in a more short-term time frame. I'm giving an example of sort of like what this might look like. This is out of the Okeechobee Boulevard study. One of the deliverables was really looking at different nodes along the corridor for Okeechobee Boulevard and also State Road 7. And so this one's at the intersection of State Road 7 and Okeechobee Boulevard. But what the consultant did was really determine like what's the future development available there. Looks like it can support new housing units, 2,000, new commercial development, 1.75 million square feet and 3,500 parking spaces, right? So if you think about that from like our scenarios, that's sort of like what we'd be doing, and we'd be feeding that into the model, right? So is the current existing land use available there? Can we still get to a certain amount of density, housing, commercial development, parking spaces, those sort of things? And we can model that by changing the socioeconomic data in the model. And then that bigger scenario, that complementary land use, well, okay, this is what we can do. What kind of capacity do we really need to get to for a vision? So those are the three that we have that are more like land use driven, that we're doing at the TPA level in this scope. Then there's lots of other models that are being ran at the regional transportation plan level. They do our base 2020 existing conditions model. They do our 2050 conditions model run, the regional needs assessment. And then new ones for them at that level are going to be a scenario based on autonomous connected electric vehicles and shared vehicles and technology surrounding that, and see how that impacts the model. They're looking to do a resiliency scenario that might consider more environmental factors with sea level rise, rise in surface temperatures, storm surge. And then another one is going to be disruptions and opportunities. So for example, telecommuting, telehealth, how does that work from home? How does that really impact travel patterns? And then there's the cost feasible model, which is the three MPOs, their Lrtps, the products that they are going to have cost feasible that can be done, that final model run. So those are all sort of ones that we can reference in our plan. Maybe even use some of the inputs if you wanted to, if they're done in time, to integrate into our model with our consultant. But this is what they're running at the regional level. And then the outputs from those scenarios and the modeling, what are we trying to really accomplish? It's really going to come down to our goals, objectives, and measures of the TPA. So we already have those set in our 2045 plan, but we're refining those. Are they measuring what we really want to measure? And then also trying to include other types of outcomes that the public and other people we've talked to need to see what they really care about. So equity is one of them. There's also been a greater discussion on housing affordability and job access. So, that might be an opportunity to, with those scenario runs we're doing for land use and development here at the TPA, if we know that we can fit more affordable housing in certain areas, and what does that do for job access and the overall amount of housing stock we can put out there? If we can model it in this, that'd be great. If we can do that, and then other agencies in the county can use that data. And then lastly, with the scenario planning, when it comes to those land use changes and strategies, trying to figure out what can we do to incentivize and support preferred development patterns and update land use policies, because we're going to be working with a lot of jurisdictions when it comes to that. And this is my last slide. Lgb Evaluation Implementation. I wanted to focus on this one because we were trying to do it with our 2045 plan, but I think it can be done a lot better is really how are we going to get these things implemented, not just from a cost feasible standpoint of products that we know can get funded, but also from a standpoint of other desires that we have and how we should be pushing forward that, right? So I'm hoping that people can take this document in the end and use it as a tool where they know, okay, this is a priority in my community. I know it's not funded right now, but here's the steps I can take to get it funded. I need to have a local dedicated funding source, and I can then go after these discretionary grants, and I can try to get this funded. So I'm hoping that can be sort of the actions plan to get every one of our desires potentially, and in the end, implemented. That's all I have. Like I said, I don't have to take all your comments today. You read through the document, or based on my presentation, if you want to just provide feedback to me in an email, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair. Khurshid, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk, so you should be able to unmute here. You should see here in a moment, you're being asked to unmute.
Kashid Mahiuddin with Palm Beach County Planning again. The document refers under the 8.4 scenario summary, the scenarios and regional focusing on performance measures adopted from Task 4. Task 4 is on page 9. and it refers to currently adopted 2045 Lrtp goals on page 70. When you go to those goals in page 70, and one of them, and they are separate performance measures, but one that stands out is on page 83, goal 5, where for walking, existing split is the latest in 2017 was 1.5%, biking 0.62%, transit 1.88%, and 2030 goals for walking is 5% and 2045 for 10%. Biking existing 0.62%, 2030 3%, and 2045 5%. Transit 1.88 existing percent, 7% by 2030, and 15% by 2045. Those numbers, as I recall, those were picked not on a technical analysis, but based upon a vision. In technical document and technical analysis, such as the long-range transportation plan, it should be based upon a technical analysis which rely on the modeling, travel demand forecast modeling, and the transit modeling as part of that. And they now have actually, pedestrian and bicycle components in there too, I think, if I'm correct. But it should be based upon, right now we are at a technical advisory committee meeting. So I don't know how technically we can support this without detailed analysis. So I think it should be changed to reflect that, yeah, those are good scenarios if you want to give those scenarios. For example, if I'm a consultant and somebody asks me, hey, I want to raise my walking from 1% to 10%, I will probably provide bicycle pedestrian, everywhere. And I can probably bring up a plan where, you can hope that can be achieved. But the trends are different. So trends analysis is basically every MPO does that. I think with, technically you use the trends to forecast the future. Excuse me,
your 3 minutes for public comment have elapsed.
Okay. So I don't know if we can support this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, Krishit. And for you all in the room and listening on, and Krishit's referencing our 2045 adopted goals, objectives, and targets. And one of those was mode split, which we have some pretty aspirational targets in there when it comes to pedestrian and bicycle mode split into the future. And what I can say for this is that, in the scope of services for 2050, we are looking to refine those or create new ones and make sure that they're appropriate. And so I can make sure that in that scope, I'll put a little bit more wording about like making sure it's based off of technical analysis and that it's feasible. And so I can do that for you all. And then when we're getting to that during the process, we can make sure that we have this discussion in more detail when it comes to are these the correct ones to measure and are these the correct targets for the future?
Couple of comments or questions. One of them on the scenario planning. You outlined 3 scenarios. One of them includes some changes in land use policies. The other 2 scenarios are based on today's land use policies, but they may be a reallocation of uses, right? That's kind of my understanding of the 3. I would just, and I missed this, I guess, in my previous reviews, this document, but I do not see just a status quo scenario. Aren't we comparing those 3 scenarios to what would happen if we changed nothing? If the existing land use policies remain, but there was no reallocation of uses, which is the variable that you're introducing to the existing land use policies. Because if we did nothing, what would happen? And then we have these other 3 scenarios that we could use to evaluate, right, the differences between that. I do not remember seeing that in the document, and I don't believe that you mentioned that as something that should be included. I'm just bringing it up because should be kind of the the starting point. The other comment, and this is something that Javier and I had mentioned before in our written comments, this has to do with item 7, which pertains to the evaluation of the project evaluation and cost estimates. I'm still a little bit unsure as to whether it is wise to have a consultant do the ranking of what could be hundreds of projects, right? Because we are going to be asking for projects from all the different municipalities, and we have this huge variety of projects, many of which would be, I mean, for different timeframes. Some of them may be projects that are within the next 10 years, others within the next 20 years or 25 years, and then do some sort of scoring of all those projects to determine which should be the priorities. I'm still a little bit skeptical that we're going to have something that is going to be workable. So it just as a comment, I know that is one of the tasks that is included there in the scope of services. I'm not sure how that is going to be done, and given the huge variety of projects, timeframes, and even all different characteristics of them. So that's kind of the two major issues that I just still wanted to bring up.
Thank you. For your first point, when it comes to the baseline scenario, the regional team, I'm going to clarify in the document more. I think I can make that connection a little better. They'll run the existing plus committed 2050 scenario. So the existing plus committed just are those products that are in the tip already that are going to be constructed and implemented. So those will be included in the model run, but then nothing else will be included in the model run. So that'll be our 2050 baseline scenario. And the way we are tackling the development patterns for the trend scenario is Palm Beach County Planning and Zoning already puts out the population and housing forecasts, so which is great. So we just need to check those. And they worked with the Florida's Bieber on those out of Gainesville. And so that sort of encompasses what the trend is going to be for population and housing. And then we need to work on what that trend is going to be for employment. But that will serve as the baseline scenario. And your summary of those three scenarios we're going to run for land use at the TPA is correct, right? So it would be taken from that trend scenario, and where from that, keeping the control total the same at the county level, how can we fit it into certain areas based on land use?
So that'll be the plus committed.
Yes, that would be the baseline.
That'll be your baseline, yep. And that does not, that is existing land use policies without any reallocation of uses.
Correct, that's what that would be, yep. And then for your other point, it's a good point to mention that, how are we going to sort of score and rank projects, and whether we need to have a scoring and ranking system and what that may look like. Obviously, if we have hundreds of projects of all types, and some are local versus a CIS capacity project, right? They're totally two different types of projects. I think what I foresee is scoring them in a way to at least know how well they're meeting our goals, objectives. Whether they're actually prioritized or not, you know, I don't know what that might look like, and I guess we can have more discussion on that. But it's a good point. Right now, we have existing programs that are set up for people to apply annually, right? So, and that's our local initiatives and transportation alternatives. Other places might just have them in their Lrtp, and that's what they spend their money on, is those direct prioritizations in there, where we set up programs based on scoring systems. But it is a good discussion to have about what that might look like. I do want it to be some sort of, as Khurshid mentioned, you know, making sure that these products have some type of quantitative analysis to it to determine, are they meeting our future metrics or targets. And so we may do that, but it might not equate to a full total score in the end as a priority.
Terrence?
Yes, thank you. Two things real quick. I think it's in section 4. In the evaluation, is it possible to have the consultant look at either the 2040 or 2045 existing plans and match that up against the TIP to get sort of a side-by-side on, okay, here was the plan, and I say 2040 because the 2045 is probably too new, to see how the investment aligns with our goals. So we may have to drop back to the 2040 or maybe even the 2035, but do it side by side. Here, at the time that that plan was initiated and adopted, here's what we wanted to do over the next decade. Here's what we actually did and where we invested our money, and actually create a side by side or a grading system. I think it's in the, we just approved, what was it? The UPWP. I know there are a number of metrics and KPIs, but to actually spend the time to go back and look at, are we even on track? Mm-hmm. And is the amount of money and effort we spend creating this LRTP, is it actually translating into investment? And what is the corollary?
Mm-hmm. Terrence, it's a very good point. We had our staff work with our consultant recently, Kim Horn, on a little bit of that. It is actually a very difficult task because our requirements about how we show products in our LRTP has changed over the past couple of decades. But we did compile a list of LRTP projects. It's sort of been on hold right now, but I think it's sort of a good basis for that sort of analysis, and I can write that into the scope. I think that'd be appropriate to put that in there. But
yeah, I just wanted to let Terrence know, and obviously as part of your standard process, anytime a project moves into the TIP, there's a planning consistency check that FHWA requires. So DOT and the TPA work together to make sure that any project that comes into the TIP is reflected in by page reference in the LRTP and where it came from. So there is a standard flow and consistency from the LRTP. That's not to say that we don't have modifications to the LRTP over time, and but you will find that the time bands do generally get tracked. So hopefully they be able to provide that information pretty easily. So
okay, so well, I heard you say it's relatively easily, and then I heard him say it's pretty difficult, and that's why it's not done.
But I mean, the information's out there. I mean, if you want to look at the last 5 TIPs, you can probably do a pretty quick cross check against the time band of the LRTP in terms of just projects.
Mm-hmm. If we could just add it and let's see what it looks like. It sounds like we should be very closely correlated based on that statement. And we're just something to throw in there so we can see what our performance looks like.
Sure.
Secondly, you had something else?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Fine. I'm sorry.
Number 2, I had asked for specifically with telecommuting, and I know you mentioned it, but it was very brief and it kind of got put in with a number of other things. Will this analysis be able to, not necessarily definitively, but provide some general metric on the do nothing option? If I'm just using this as an example, if every government in Palm Beach County had 50% of their employees work from home for 2 days, we would have to invest 0 in transit and transportation because the demand side will fall so much. We would meet capacity constraints. Are we going to get analysis at that level? Because that then can turn into policy advocacy, because right now we're putting a lot of money into asphalt that has a lot of other deleterious effects, where the actual do nothing option may be more economically viable long-term. And I don't need to go into the rest. Are we going to get something at that level of detail? Because again, it was sort of, that ask of mine was in a long list of things in one sentence in your presentation.
It's a good question. There's been a lot of discussion at the regional level about that specifically. The scenario planning that was put in their scope for the regional plan was included with a few other things in that. How that sort of plays out in the end, I'm not sure in the end what that scenario specifically is going to look like, if it's going to be jumbled in with a bunch of other sort of trends that that might happen, like disruptors. I assume, and I'll work with the regional team on that with Greg here, but I assume that that one will be some additional sort of tool that you can turn on and off in the model run for work at home, and it is able to be calculated into that and ran as an input to see what that result would be. So I'm assuming, like, in the end, we can just take that. If the regional team runs a scenario with a lot of factors in it, if the regional team can't just parse out just that specific one, we could probably do it because it would already be created for us. We can do it with our consultant, but it's still working through that process right now to see what that scenario is going to look like. There will be a scenario ran with telecommuting in there, but will it include other things? I'm not sure yet.
And I guess that's my point. I'm asking for a specific scenario with a no infrastructure improvement and telecommuting. What level of uptake for telecommuting would be required to have no expansion of capacity and meet level of service? That's a very specific scenario run.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, and I'll I don't know how we want to approach this. I can put it in there, or I can work with the consultant first with the regional level and see what they're going to do. We can wait on that. I mean, I can also add it in there if you'd like. So, if there's any more thoughts on it?
I would just like to say, if you don't add it in there specifically, they're going to say it's not in the scope and there's no money for it and it can't get done.
We'll follow up directly to make sure I do it.
Okay. Anyone else online with their hand raised? Natalie?
No, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry, Javier. Sorry.
Thank you. Just a couple of suggestions on the measuring performance. One would be if we could add connectivity. Connectivity is a big factor in determining multimodal, incentives and multimodal trips. When you're traveling from point A to point B, if there is a way you can park your car somewhere, take transit, or ride your bicycle from home to whatever your destination is, or maybe take transit in between, whatever, the connectivity should be a factor. The other thing that I'd like to suggest is following what Terrence was talking about, trying to find a way to provide incentives to communities through the planning effort, or through, I guess, funding would be another one. So instead of having some funds dedicated to add capacity to a facility within a city, if the city achieves multimodal goals, those funds can be given to the city for projects that could be, they're pressing to the city, they could be facilitated. In some ways, kind of like a grant, but maybe just a set aside of funding. And this is, I'm talking really 80,000 feet in elevation here, but it's something to think about as part of the Lrtp for the future, that we got to think that way, because there is, achieving multimodal goals is extremely difficult. City of West Palm Beach, I think, were one of the few cities in the country, especially in South Florida, that can been very proactive and being able to achieve some goals. Nevertheless, we still have some, challenges in front of us. But looking at the future, and regionally speaking, as the TPA is a regional organization, we got to think about that connectivity, and we got to think about the multimodal incentives, because unless you find that there is some sort of an incentive, or it's completely safe and connected system, then you adventure into the taking another mode. Otherwise, you're always going to be relying on the car. And I think we have been talking about it for so long in this profession. And I think that everybody here in the committee may agree with me that, maybe aging myself a little bit, but, ICE-T was the start of the whole thing from my standpoint. Back in 1991, the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act. Those of you who are young enough to don't know what ICE-T was. But, and it continues through, from that time on. And so happens that now we are actually seeing the fruits of that effort, through all those years. And who knows, maybe 30, 60 years before we see the actual multimodal connectivity achieving the goals that we all desire, but we got to get there somewhere. So I'm trying to find a way that we can, through the Lrtp, we can facilitate that goal. That's all. Thank you.
Natalie?
Thank you. I remember the 2045 update really well. I can't believe that we're already talking about the 2050. My comments are pretty limited at this point. I just wanted to be sure in section 3.2 There's references to when it comes to stakeholder and community meetings. There's references to municipal councils and county commission, et cetera. And maybe better verbiage might be municipalities in general, or Palm Beach County, because I'm sure it's not just going to be the councils and the political representatives. It'll be the staff. So you may want to just revise that language to be more generic. So you're including the staff. Also, when you're referencing infrastructure owners, there's several cities that have an abundance of local roadways. So I think municipalities should be mentioned in that bundle as well. And then my only other comment from a technical perspective is just, the 2045 plan was, it was messy and there were a lot of meetings. And so when you're accounting for a scope to provide to your consultant, I would suggest accounting for flexibility when you're carving in a certain number of meetings with stakeholders, and provide for that flexibility, because stuff is going to come up as part of this project or as part of this process.
Okay, we have Mo on the line.
Karen, sorry, a couple of other things, and I will shut up, I promise. You mentioned, Andrew, that both Miami-Dade and Broward counties, MPOs, or whatever the names are nowadays, are also undergoing similar process right now. So, and this is probably something that you already did, but I assume that you guys may be also looking at their scope of services, just to see, because there may be some things that we haven't thought of that they are included in their scope of services that would be a good idea for us to also incorporate into ours. And then the final thing is, with regards to the TAC's role in this process, I think it's good that you are going to be bringing items to the TAC to get input, feedback. At the same time, I just want to make sure that, again, I don't think that this committee should be the consultant to the consultant. I mean, we all have full-time jobs here. So it's going to be, I guess, a fine line there, a balancing act as to, we could spend 5-6 hours in each meeting discussing some of the items that the consultant brings to us on the Lrtp, and again, we have other things that we need to do as a committee and just with our respective municipalities. So I'm just bringing it up because I think it's good to bring it to us, but at the same time, there has to be some balance. We cannot be spending 5-6 hours every month on that. And my other final suggestion would be, if there's going to be documents and plans and ideas that the consultant wants for us to comment on, if they can be provided to us with as much time in advance as possible. I mean, for example, this packet that we received, I'm talking about the agenda overall, we just got it Thursday night. We only had Friday and Tuesday, really, because of the holiday, to review it. So if the expectation is for us to provide some meaningful comments on the Lrtp, hopefully we can have ample time to review whatever the consultant wants for us to comment on.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Mo?
Thank you. I'm not gonna go in detail about our comments. I think we are planning on sending an email with more detailed comments and suggested each and actually edits to the scope document to Andrew. That would be more appropriate. But generally, we have 3 general concerns, or let's call it concerns. It's input and comments. In the document throughout, when it talks about a meeting with local governments and or representatives, it talks about providing just update or feedback or update on the status of the project, but it does not emphasize also receiving input from those entities. and that will be reflected in our comments to Andrew. Also, the issue with in task 6.4, this seems to suggest or instruct the consultant to integrate / adopt the Okeechobee Boulevard SR7 light rail project, because I believe that's what is being recommended by the consultant on that one. And while we think it should, the scope of the 2050 Lrtp should require the consultant to model the scenarios for the short-term scenario, model with and without this proposed project, which is the light rail along these two corridors, and to show what would be the impact and help further evaluate the impact of such a project if it were to be adopted. The way it's written now, the scenario in the scope, we are taking it. It's done deal. It's approved. It's decided. We are moving forward with it. It's reality and it's fact, and we do not think that it should be treated as such. And it belongs really well into the short-term scenario that Andrew spoke of that would be included. So we suggest that there will be, again, two with and without scenarios, with and without the light rail on these two corridors. And also, generally, any of the scenarios and the modeling that is done needs to be to include with and without scenarios or modeling for with and without the 5-6 plans with their clearly indicative or impact of the lane repurposing for exclusive transit that is implied in the 561 plan. So that would also allow us to see the impact of these plans if we were to implement them all the time. And when that is done, also the consultant needs to be instructed in the scope to look at what impact would that be on the parallel or adjacent, links that might have to deal with the overflow of demand that is thrown out due to the implemented policies and or projects along any of those corridors. Like an example, when you implement this light rail along Okeechobee and SR7, you need to also, when you run the model, you need to look at what impact is and what additional demand is being placed on the parallel routes that are not designed or intended to carry that overflow because of the increased congestion that is imposed by putting that and reducing the capacity on these two corridors. These are, as I said, generally what are along these lines are going to be our comments, but we are going to be providing them to Andrew in writing shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. Okay, I don't see any raised cards. I'll move on to the next item, administrative items. Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I just have two recommendations for the input data side for the model. I understand that the TPA had a very good coordination with FDOT for all the TIP projects. For some local governments, for example, City of Boca Raton, we do have similar things like cities capital improvements. That's more comparable like the TIP in FDOT. So I would encourage the consultants to reach out to the local municipalities, just kind of go through the city's local plans. I understand those local roads may not necessarily reflect in the network, but at least we have some, consistent and good data, accurate data. And for the socioeconomic data side, I would also suggest, to have the opportunity to share data with the local government, just kind of to see if the socioeconomic data in the model is consistent and reflects the city's long range plans. I think that would be really helpful to, to make the accurate data for the model runs. That's all my inputs for specific for data collection and the source repository section 2.2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just another check around, make sure I'm not missing anyone. Okay, items 4A through 4D on your agenda are informational only. There will be no staff presentations unless required by a committee member. Are there any public comments on these items?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, as a reminder, we have no scheduled meeting in August. Our next TAC meeting is scheduled for September 7th, 2022. At this time, our committee meeting is adjourned.